What if I told you that the state with some of the nicest people, best farmland, and the strongest communities in America is also facing a cancer crisis? What if the air in your basement, the water you drink, and the environment around us could be contributing to a problem most people don't even realize exists? Today we're asking uncomfortable questions. Why does Iowa have one of the highest cancer rates in America? And more importantly, what can we do about it? This isn't about politics, this isn't about fear, this is about facts, families, and finding answers. Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Against the Odds. I'm your host, Chewy Rivas. Today we got my friend Cody Smith. He is actually the Director of Climate Initiatives of Iowa. Cody, thanks for being here, man. I'm fired up for this series and fired up for this episode, so let's get it, man. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here and talk about these issues today.
Awesome, brother. So where are you from? Who's Cody? Who is Cody Smith?
Yeah, I actually grew up a farm kid. I grew up in rural Indiana, actually, but I've spent about 12 or 13 years here in the state of Iowa. I came out for Iowa State, go Cyclones.
Yeah.
And
Cyclones.
decided to stay out here and work on these issues on environmental and climate policy and how that affects people's health. So I've been doing that my entire career.
Awesome, man. How old are you again? One more
I'm
time?
30.
You're
yeah,
only 30.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Awesome. How'd you get such a good position?
You know, I've just spent my life being a nerd for these issues. I grew up, we had a farm pond behind our farm, and it was the center of a lot of family activities, weddings, graduation, open houses, that sort of thing. And it was always so full of algae, and I wanted to get to the bottom of it. You know, what caused that? And that's when I really learned the first time about nitrates, water quality, all these different issues. And I thought, you know what, that'd make a good career. So I've stuck with it for the last, 10 years or so of my career has been in this area and how it relates to climate change and other things like that, and went to graduate school for the same thing. So kind of just put my head down and did the work and got a lot of experience, and it's led me here.
Wow, that's incredible, man. It's almost like you're meant for this. You're kind of born for this, and you stuck with it. You are the right person to be on this for episode 2 of this cancer series that we got going on, because we're going to be focusing on nitrates.
Right.
And it sounds like you're the right person for this. So thanks again for coming on all the way from Des Moines.
Yeah.
You drove up this morning, so that's a big deal. How long have you been doing this for?
I've been with the Iowa Environmental Council for 3 years. I spent several years with another regional nonprofit working on the same issues, and then went to graduate school for these issues as well. So it's been, I guess math is hard for me, but it's been, I guess, almost 10 years of just really focusing on the intersection between water quality, energy costs, and renewable energy, and the environment and people's health. And so I've been doing this for quite some time now.
Dude, that's big time, man. What does your job entail exactly?
Yeah, so my job is really focused on helping Iowans and their communities identify how the environment impacts their health, and then helping the leaders of those communities work with the most impacted people to get things done. So for example, here in Fort Dodge, there are some areas that flood more. And so those are the people we want to talk to about what the solutions are. And then I want to work with leaders in the community, like public officials, like emergency managers, public health, other folks that have a role in fixing those problems and making sure that those impacts are a little bit less bad for the next flood, to make sure that we're adapting to what is our new reality.
Wow, that's great. Do you ever talk to our local emergency?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the folks here in Fort Dodge. I reached out. We were trying to get a meeting set up today, but the scheduling didn't work out. But definitely familiar with folks up here in the area. Unity Point and other folks in the healthcare system are also, people that we work with quite a bit.
Yeah, Unity Point's great. They've actually wanted to come on and kind of talk about this, be part of this series. They want to be talk about preventative stuff that they can do because of Iowa's high cancer rise that we have. But they're good partners. So what made you get into this? Was it just you growing up, the algae and...
Yeah, it taught me a lot about how the decisions that people make impact our environment. And that's really what is at the center of all of this work that we do now. There are just so many things that we take for granted, whether it's clean drinking water or clean air, and we just don't always understand those systems. I really am, like I said, kind of a nerd, and so I wanted to figure out, how do we have those systems? How do they work? And what happens when they fail? And that's the situation that we're in here in the state of Iowa. You know, there are anywhere in the world you can work on water, but here in Iowa, we have such a great challenge with the nitrates in our drinking water, and it's clearly impacting our health. And that requires a very serious amount of attention and time and expertise to get through this process.
Well, I think Iowa's lucky to have you, man. You know your stuff.
I appreciate
I
that.
love that. Last quick personal question that I have for you. I did hear that you wrote a book or a co-signer or a co-writer or something. What's that about?
Yeah, so we released our Cancer and Environmental Risk Factors report earlier this year. I think it was in April. And that is a huge first of its kind report that takes a look at, it's about 100 pages, that takes a look at how the environment impacts or could impact Iowa's second highest in the country cancer rates. We are also...
If we don't do anything?
Yeah, so basically it just looks like what we have now. So I always start this conversation saying, I'm not a cancer expert. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a physician. I'm not a healthcare or public health person. I'm an environmental expert. And so what I bring to this conversation is looking at how the environment is existing and where the pollution is, where it comes from, how do we fix it, and importantly for this conversation, what happens when we don't.
Right.
And so that report really took a first of its kind assessment of where that exists in Iowa, where the challenges are. It had several different pollutants in there from nitrates, but also forever chemicals, also known as PFAS. We also looked at radon and pesticides, all of these different things that we see a lot of in Iowa's environment, more so than anywhere else in the country. And then how does that impact our cancer rates? Because nobody had done it yet. And so I was a co-author of that report.
Wow, that book's is the name of the book, or is it?
So it's the Cancer and Environmental Risk Factors report. You can find it on our website, iaenvironment.org. I went along with my colleagues, were the lead authors on that report. We all kind of handled different sections of the report and worked together to find out where this information was and put it together. It went through a rigorous review process from very high-level cancer professionals and physicians and all the things that we don't have in our wheelhouse of expertise. For example, there was a provost at Drake University that looked at it. She's a cancer epidemiologist.
Wow.
We had a former director from the National Institutes of Health and their cancer prevention work. So, I mean, we had a really great array of scientists review this report before we put it out.
You got your ducks in a row. You made sure it was right, accurate. That's what, and that's the truth. That's what people need, man. They need this accurate stuff.
Yep.
Any cliff notes on there that we should know right off the bat?
Yeah, I think the big one is we have a problem. We clearly have a problem. We're one of only 3 states in the country where our cancer is going up and not down. We have the fastest rising rate of those 3 states, and we're second highest in the country, on track to become the highest in the country.
Oh, no.
And in fact, we're only second to Kentucky, which has nearly 3 times our smoking rate. And so that is something that explains theirs quite a bit.
What the heck, man? You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
You know, I always tell this joke. I moved from LA to Iowa for the cost of living. Now I live here, might cost me my life because of these nitrates, radon, and all these environmental stuff that we're dealing with. So that's interesting. And you're freaking smart. I love it.
No, I appreciate that.
I love that, man. I like. So let's get down to the nitty gritty, I guess. What are nitrates, and how do they end up in our drinking water?
Yeah, nitrates are a naturally occurring nutrient that are found in soils, found in the, just in the landscape. But we also apply a lot of nitrates to our agricultural system. So there are 2 main sources when it comes to agricultural production, and that is animal manure. And we have a lot of animals and livestock, and we use that manure to fertilize our fields.
Is it true we have like 22 million pigs or something
there are like
that?
7 pigs for every single person in the state of Iowa. So yeah, it is
manure,
a
man.
lot of manure. I think the number I saw was that the amount of manure we produce here from our livestock alone is the equivalent of 125 million people.
What?
And so you can kind of think like, we only have 3 million people in Iowa, but imagine if you put 125 into the state, and that's the amount of manure that we're dealing with. Wow. So it has to go somewhere. And so a lot of farmers put it on fields. A lot of them put them on the same fields because we have no way to track kind of where they're being applied or how there's no limits on any of that. And that's just one source of our nitrates.
You know, it's crazy. When I moved here, I have a colleague or a friend that when they do apply this and it smells like straight manure, he goes, you smell that? I'm like, yeah. He goes, smells like money. Well, no, I used to tell him it smells like cancer, man.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if I was right or he was right, but I think I'm right on this one.
Yeah.
So that's one source. What's
Yep.
the other source?
The other main source in our ag system is synthetic fertilizers. So for corn and soybeans, less so for soybeans because they produce their own nitrogen, but for corn, we apply synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. We put it on our farm fields at a rate that is pretty much unregulated and pretty much uncontrolled.
Really?
And they just follow the recommendation of their retailer. Well, those retailers are the same folks that sell them the product and make the money.
More is better,
Exactly.
they probably say.
So even if it's like they do a soil test and they find that they have enough nutrients in their soil, a lot of times there's this like saying in agricultural settings, and I know this from living and working in rural Iowa and growing up on a farm, you want to put something fresh out there this year. You want to make sure it's out there. It's completely unnecessary. And so we apply so much and only a small fraction is taken up by our plants, the corn and other crops, that the rest of it ends up in our water, whether it's groundwater or surface water like rivers and streams. And that's how it ends up in our waterways.
Sheesh. So that's crazy, man. So they're just applying a bunch of nitrates to the plants. None of it's actually getting to the plants. Most of it's going through or just leaking into our rivers or in our creeks and then obviously gets in our drinking water, right?
Yeah, and the reason that happens so quickly is nitrates move with water, right? And so we've designed our agricultural system. You know, if you take a look around north central Iowa, for example, it used to be a lot of wetlands and a lot of prairies. We've gotten rid of 97.5% of all of our wetlands in the state. And so there's only less than 3% that remain.
How did we do that?
We just drained them. We put field tile underneath, and we're like, oh, look, now we can farm it. And that's why we did it. And then we channelized every river. We straightened it out. We made sure that the water moves as quickly off that field as possible, which is great for making it be able to farm.
Right.
But it's also great for delivering the nitrates directly to our waterways. The other part of this, too, is, you know, with the wetlands and then prairie, we used to have most of this farmland was prairie. And we have less than 0.01% of our native prairie remaining in the state of Iowa. So we've taken away all of the natural systems that filter nitrates and replaced it with a system that is just designed to deliver water off of a farm field into the waterway as quickly as possible. And that's why we have a nitrate problem.
Holy cow. That's huge, man. And how come no one stopped this? I was like,
we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and if you add in federal dollars, we've spent over $1 billion in the last 10 years or so. But the challenges are really political at this point. We have a strategy that is completely voluntary, and it doesn't have any real teeth or requirements to it. We have an environmental law set up in our state that doesn't allow for penalties when you break the law to be more than $10,000, for example. So just one example of this that's really egregious. In southwest Iowa and Red Oak, there was a fertilizer spill. They left a valve open on a tank, and it dumped hundreds of thousands of gallons of nitrogen fertilizer straight into the Nishnabotna River. And it killed every fish for like 50 miles. It's like 800,000 fish. And by law, that company, the new cooperative, could only be fined $10,000. Wow. It's a multi-million-dollar company. Yeah. And so when you think about it, that's just the cost of doing business. It's not a deterrent at all. It's like, oh yeah, my bad, slap on the wrist, move to the next thing. Now it went through a process, they ended up paying $50,000 instead, but it's really just a drop in the bucket.
Well, it's like they're not accountable for their actions, really, and the punish doesn't solidify or is not enough for the punishment, or the punishment isn't for the crime. It does not line up. And especially for a $1 billion company, I just don't think that's fair. That's interesting. And they need to change that, obviously, right?
Yeah, our state laws don't reflect the reality that we live in.
Are these laws such old laws, or? They've
just been around for a long time. You know, that $10,000 fee, for example, I don't remember exactly what year. I think maybe it was early 2000s, but think about inflation. $10,000 in 2008 is a lot different than $10,000 in 2026. And so even then, it's just a fraction of the impact that it had before.
Sure. I know there was a spillage around here in Fort Dodge of a byproduct or something like that. They got fined a little bit more than $50,000. But it's very interesting. It's these big companies don't really, I don't know. I feel like you said, it's just outdated, I guess, the
Yeah.
punishments.
The other thing that I like to say in this conversation is because a lot of folks, especially those who are kind of against doing anything, and a lot of folks who have a lot of interest economically in this system, is that I don't think that farmers are the villains here.
No, heck
Nobody
no.
at IEC, the Iowa Environmental Council, nobody thinks that farmers are the villains here. And we all know that farmers would like to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
But we have a broken system.
For sure.
And I always like to point out that farmers aren't doing exceptionally well right now either, with tariffs, with input costs, with the markets being the way that they are, and then also all of the things going on with cancer and water,
Right.
all of that stuff. This is just a broken system that doesn't
Yeah.
benefit them either.
I agree.
So the solutions we have in front of us are things that we can do to both make it a better, more fair economic system and help farmers, but also fix our problem that the rest of us pay with our health.
Yep, and I was going to touch on that. Farmers are definitely not to blame. They're actually the victims. They're the ones that are getting lied to by the companies that they get their fertilizer from. They're the ones that are getting the cancer. Unfortunately, you know, and they're the ones dealing with this, you know, economy and all that tariffs and stuff like that. They're the victims, honestly, and they just been lied to. I feel like by these big corporations that want to sell this fertilizer. So I agree with you. They're absolutely not the ones to blame, and I do feel bad. And the people that do blame them, that's shame on them.
Yeah, and those people are usually the first one to use them as their political shield, right? And then not do anything about it and say that everybody else is blaming farmers. It's not about that.
No.
We just have a really serious problem, and we need to spend some time and some resources actually trying to fix it. And this is how we do it. You know, there's one report that they did in central Iowa for the Raccoon and Des Moines River, and it was funded by Polk County. And they looked at the Central Iowa Source Water Resource Assessment is what it was called. And they found that 80% of their nitrates, which are some of the highest in the state, if not the highest in the state in those two rivers, 80% of it comes from ag sources. So we know that it's like, you know, lawn fertilizer plays a role and sewage systems play a role, but it's at less than 20%, right? So we know that this is the by and large main source of our nitrate problem.
Sheesh, you're right on, dude. It's crazy. I don't understand. Okay, let's just keep going. Also, we'll get through this here. Here's a question: just drinking the water, nitrate. What if you you shower in it, or you wash your hands, or wash your vegetables with this nitrate water? Does it still affect you like drinking it, or were the effects there?
So nitrate itself is not carcinogenic in the water. Like if you get into a high nitrate lake, or you take a shower or a bath or something, if you're not ingesting it, you're fine.
Okay.
So I tell people go recreate. Make sure that I always just say I recommend taking a shower immediately after, because we have other issues with our water that are not nitrate, bacteria and microcystins and other things that come from the algae blooms that we get, and manure and bacteria in the water. But nitrates themselves are not carcinogenic. And so when we talk about it in this context, it's really about the conversion of nitrates to nitrites and other compounds in your digestive system and your stomach as you kind of ingest it with drinking water or food. That's when it becomes a problem.
Okay, so they say, because someone says that obviously your skin is like one of the biggest organs, and it sucks in this nitrate water if you're in the nitrate. So that's not a thing.
It shouldn't be. It's not the most prevalent exposure pathway is what we talk about. It's not how it's getting into your body.
What about, this is a kind of crazy one. What about spinach, man? I heard some research on spinach has some of the highest nitrates. Is that a thing?
It's one of those things where you may have seen the video of a state senator saying oh, you should be concerned about spinach and leafy greens. This is actually the key difference with nitrates, and it gets a little sciencey here. I'm going to do my best, and I got my notes to make sure that I don't mess it up too.
I'm in.
Basically, let's say you're eating leafy greens like spinach. It's got high nitrates, but it also is high in antioxidants. And so when that's consumed together, it kind of has a process where it converts into different compounds that are actually heart healthy. So it's not bad for you to eat spinach, leafy greens, other things like that with high nitrates, because it's got these other compounds. Now, if you eat a lot of red meat, and if you eat a lot of cured meats, like think of like a charcuterie board or a hamburger or other things that are just red meat generally. Now, that doesn't have the antioxidants in there or the vitamin C that might come with veggies or other things. And so it turns into different compounds, which those compounds are already recognized as animal carcinogens. by the agency that regulates that here in the United States. And so the science is emerging on a lot of that, but when we looked at it for our report, it was very clear to us that there were connections to several types of cancers because of that compound that gets turned into. And so it's really heavily dependent on your diet. So if you have a healthy diet, you're probably going to be a lot better off in many ways, but including this one. Whereas if you're eating, a lot of red meat and you're not exercising a lot, we know that cancer is complicated and it has many factors, but that is a key indicator of whether or not nitrates will have a carcinogenic effect in your body.
So
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
what you're saying is, if you eat the spinach has its own antioxidants that when it's in your body, it counteracts the nitrates and therefore does not affect you like if you're just drinking straight nitrate water. Is that what I
Exactly.
understand?
Yeah. And, in our report that I mentioned earlier that I'm a co-author on, we looked at all the different scientific literature. We've read every study that we could about nitrates in cancer, whether it was in Iowa or abroad. And there were so many connections between different types of cancers, whether it's bladder cancer, colon cancer, rectal cancer, all of those different things at levels much lower than what our drinking water standard is at. So there's some that, I wrote some of these down because these numbers get jumbled a little bit for me. But on colon cancer, at just 5 milligrams per liter, there was more than double.
Of nitrates.
Yep,
Okay.
of nitrates in our water. There's a 190% increase for proximal colon cancer in one study that we found.
What?
So that's at 5. That's half of our standard. I just wrote down a couple more of these.
Yeah.
At 2.3, there was a 50% greater risk for colorectal cancer. Ovarian cancer down at 3, there was more than 4 times, or 3 milligrams per liter over 4 years of exposure, twice the risk of ovarian cancer. So all of these different lower levels with long exposure and those dietary factors included, there's so much out there that the science suggests that this is a real problem.
This is a huge problem, man.
Yeah, and it's
Holy
an inconvenient
cow.
political reality too, because we know that Iowa is really heavily based around our agricultural system, and so a lot of times people will say, "Oh, you should be really worried about leafy greens," or "These people are blaming farmers," and it's like nobody in our office sits around all day and says, "How can we make farmers' lives worse?" Right? Many of us grew up on farms, right? Myself included, and my family is full of farmers, and my grandpa is battling oral cancer right now,
Really?
which is one of the nastiest things. And he never smoked, never drank,
Sorry to hear
never
that,
chewed
man.
tobacco, and he's got like a hole in the side of his face. And so for people to suggest
Is he a farmer?
yeah.
Okay.
And so for people to suggest that we're out to do that is just completely inaccurate. We want to find a solution because these are people's lives.
Yeah, and so you're like you said, you're in it. It's your relative, so
Yeah.
the passion's definitely there. I could feel it, man.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you doing this, and honestly, this is great. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming
Thank
again,
you.
man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Are nitrates getting worse over time, or are we finally just paying attention more to it?
It's getting worse because our agricultural system is one, we're adding more drainage tile every year to move that water more quickly away from the farm fields. We're applying more synthetic fertilizers, and we're adding more livestock operations. So on the CAFO side, the confined animal feeding operations, is the big livestock operations, the ones you smell when you go by.
Yeah.
Those, we have more than 2.5 times the amount of CAFOs than the next highest state, which is Minnesota.
Wow.
And that's in the entire country, right? So that's, hogs,
That's
we have
huge.
millions, like 21 million or something like that. And we've got cattle, we've got, other livestock all over across the state. So we got more manure going in, we got more tiling going in, more synthetic fertilizer going in, and we see it in the numbers. So for example, and around the year 1900, our average statewide level of micrograms or milligrams per liter for nitrates in our water was around 1. Today, it's around 6, and that's a statewide average. I live in the Des Moines metro, and we just had a lawn watering ban because the nitrates were up to 19 in the Raccoon River and 17 in the Des Moines River, and it might have been higher, but those are the numbers I remember. And they banned outdoor lawn watering. And so we have to deal with the second year in a row we've had to deal with that, not because we don't have enough water, but because we have such polluted water that we can't keep up with demand at that standard of 10, which, as we discussed, is already high to protect us. It's too high to protect us from many of these things.
That's scary, man.
It
Honestly,
is.
I'm kind of freaked out, man.
Yeah.
Oh boy, man. I don't even know. I can't even move forward because I'm just holy cow. But I got to. Let's talk about the health impacts here.
Yeah.
What are the biggest health concerns linked to long-term nitrate exposures?
Yeah, so I'll start with the standard we have now. The 10 milligrams per liter was set in 1975 by the EPA for one purpose only, and it was to protect infants from blue baby syndrome. Basically, as you consume more nitrates, it interferes with those compounds I mentioned earlier. They get in your bloodstream. It makes it really hard for your blood to deliver oxygen. So the baby turns blue. They call it blue baby syndrome. That's the one thing it was set on in 1975, and it has not been reevaluated since. And so now all the science that we reference in our report, that's all come out after that standard was set, and we've not reevaluated it. So it's enough to show us that the long-term risks are cancers, whether it's colorectal cancers or kidney or bladder cancers or oral cancers or even connected. All of these different things have not been considered at all. The other point I like to make here is like that's our federal standard. And so that applies across the country, right? And it should be lower. And we make that evidence very clear in our report. But our state doesn't have to wait for the federal government to act. We can actually adopt more stringent standards if we'd like to. And so if we want to, we could lower it to 5 or 8 or give a timeline, say in 10 years, we're going to get down to 7 or whatever it might be. You know, all of that together, providing a roadmap to get there is one place that we could start. There are people who are more vulnerable to nitrate exposure because of that blue baby syndrome, obviously infants. Sure. Pregnant women, there's a lot of birth defects and complications and low birth weights that have been associated with nitrate exposure over time. But really what we're talking about a lot is cancer.
Cody, why do you think the state of Iowa hasn't lowered that 10?
It's expensive, and it takes a reforming of our agricultural system, which is the backbone of our economic system. And so we don't have a lot of the political will from our leadership, really in both parties at every level, to really get to the bottom of what this is. We know that manure is an issue. We know synthetic fertilizer is an issue. We know our waterways are not protected. There are other states that have done more. If you look at Minnesota, they implemented a mandatory buffer law. I think it's 50 yards on each side of a stream that's recognized by the state you can't farm. And so it has to be natural vegetation. And if you don't do it, you can maybe do something else to offset that, to comply with it. In a couple of years, they got 99% compliance. And the research that I was just reading the other day is that it cost about $13 million to implement that. But it yielded up to $328 million in benefits. And that's avoided health issues, flooding issues.
So what does that do? What does that do doing the 50-yard thing?
So it basically restores some of those natural buffers that I talked about that we used to have, whether that's prairie or wetlands, all of that. And what we have in Iowa is our Iowa nutrient reduction strategy. The science behind that, I know those scientists, all of the scientists who worked on that, the science is great. And it tells us that if you put in a prairie strip, you're going to get X number of percent reduction in nitrates going to the water, or phosphorus, the other nutrient we often worry about. And that's great, but we don't have the policy and the programming and the funding and really the requirements to follow those things in place. And so it's really just it's a political problem at this point. The science is there. The research is there, examples from other states, the policy, that's all there, but we just haven't acted.
Wow, that's I don't know why we haven't. That's something needs to happen. I'll tell you that.
I agree.
And I don't know why they wouldn't do it. I'm going to move forward here. Can Iowa have both strong agriculture economy and clean drinking water?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that a strong ag economy and clean drinking water can coexist. And we've seen it again in other places where they take some of these actions we know we need to take. And I think part of it too is allowing farmers the flexibility to meet some of those rules, but having the rules enforced, right? And so giving them the chance to chart their own path forward, but have the rules in place that help them get there. So set a goal. Say we want to have, we're at 10 now, we want to be at 5, and this is how we get there. It doesn't matter to me what you do, but you are going to be responsible for getting there. There's so many different ways that we can adapt those policies. And the other thing I think about a lot is the key issue we have here is that we have this agricultural system that's broken, right?
Yeah.
And we have just unchecked growth in applying fertilizer or adding more drainage tile or having larger confined animal feeding operations. You can have some of those things or even a lot of those things in this transition, but you don't have to have them at the same scale. or you maybe have them with more protections for people downstream or nearby, because right now we have a system that's completely unchecked and we're all paying for it with our health. And so the diversification of different ways of farming, different crops, investing in that, that's something the state can work on, right? We have an elected Secretary of Agriculture, for example. Like their job often is to create markets, right? Find partners to sell things. And it's not easy to create new markets for different crops and that sort of thing, but we should set those goals, right?
Yeah.
And we also, another way that I look at this too is we import, I think it's 90+% of our food to the state of Iowa, despite having the best, most fertile ground in the entire world.
What? We import it?
Yeah. And we use our land to produce ethanol and feed for animals and then ship that out.
Okay, so the corn that we grow is not consumed by...
No, it goes to
animals.
Over half of it goes to ethanol production, and then the remainder goes to animal feed. And then some of it goes to like high fructose corn syrup to be put in other places.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's very freaking crazy. So 90%, that is mind-blowing. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah, so
90%
that's
is
an
a
opportunity, right? I mean, we all have to eat. So
Yeah.
why don't we have an opportunity for farmers? And I'm not saying everybody needs to have like a vegetable garden, right? Like I don't want to seem out of touch, right? And the equipment's different. But that is a goal that we can set as a state, to have a more diverse agricultural system like we used to have.
Yeah.
That's what's changed since 1900 when we were down at 1 and now we're up at 6, is that we have completely gone in this direction of like you farm corn, soybeans, one or the other. Maybe you do both and you've got 10,000 acres of them. But you don't also have pigs or cows. And in the past, it was you do maybe a couple 100 acres of one or both, and then you've got pigs, and you might have some sheep, and you might have some, these different diversified sources of both income, but also things on the landscape. Sure. And now we just have gone full bore into this system that is just very intensive.
So it sounds like big corporations have taken over and made these farms just really just full of toxins and just for the money. It sounds like...
Yeah.
Just be honest.
I personally, and I don't know about, this isn't necessarily on behalf of the organization, but I think that's a greed problem, right? Like, I think that we have corporate agribusinesses that have squeezed every last dollar out of every farmer in our state that farms this way. Yeah. And in turn, farmers squeeze every last square inch of farmland to try to meet that. If you grow hogs, you grow them on contract. You don't set the price. There's no competition. You don't even own the hogs. You own the building. Same thing with corn and soybeans. You buy the seed from somebody else, you plant it, you sell it to the local grain elevator at a price that they determine. You own the land, you own the buildings, the equipment. So you get all the debt and you get none of the competition to help, raise your income. Wow. So it's this broken system, again, where they're victims of these large agribusinesses. Right. And how many times do we see this in our economy? It's over and over and over again.
It's sad, man. It's corporate America sometimes, I guess. It's greed, man. Greed's a terrible thing. And unfortunately, the farmers are the ones that are the victims and got to suffer for this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, getting blamed for something that's really not their fault.
Right.
What do you think that would incentives or policies actually work if we throw them out there by... You think they'd work?
There are a lot of incentives that are out there right now that I think are a good start. Whether it's helping farmers plant cover crops or helping install prairie strips, and a lot of the federal programs work really well too. And but there's a lot of issues in getting them out. One, it's totally inadequate at the scale that we need. I mean, there's just like a drop in the bucket as far as the funding goes and where it needs to be in. I'll just give you kind of the rundown of how we see it organizationally. And so if you're a farmer and you say, I want to be a part of the solution, I want to plant cover crops this year.
Cover crops? What are cover crops?
So those are plants that live in the ground year round. So after your corn's out, after your soybean's out, there's roots of living plants in all over the winter and into the spring until you terminate them and plant again. The idea being that you have living plants in the soil the whole time, and so they take up those nutrients instead of letting them flow off.
Okay.
Yeah, and then like when you get a big rainstorm or something, instead of all the soil washing away, it's kind of like grass. It's like the same idea.
Like the grasslands and stuff.
Yep. Okay. If you see a construction site, they're planting grass temporarily to keep it from washing everything away. It's the same idea.
Okay.
And it's good for soil health. It reduces nitrate runoff, all of that stuff. So that's one practice, and we have some incentives for that. But if you're a farmer and you want to do that, you go to the state and they say, yeah, we'll give you X amount per acre to plant these. and we'll do it for 2 to 3 years or whatever it is now. When I used to work for the state in this initiative, and it was like 60, I think it was 160 acres, and it was like $30 an acre for like a year.
Okay.
And then it's like the idea being,
Is that a lot?
You're
I
gonna,
don't think that's
yeah,
a lot.
It's not. And they're like, well, the idea is you're going to fall in love with this, and then you're going to do it again. How do you expect a farmer to pay $30, $40, $50 an acre? I don't even know what it is now to do all these things and then make no return on that product, right? It's a business. And so that's why it doesn't work. And the other part of it is any farmer can go to any of those programs and say, I want to do it. And they get that funding regardless of where they are. So it doesn't matter if they're like in the middle of the watershed and they've only got 60 acres when you really need the 1,000+ acres along the riverbank of the Des Moines River, right? Because that's what's really going to make the difference.
Right.
So without a plan in place to know where you want those incentives to go, a watershed plan, and a person, a watershed coordinator is what we call them, to go out and meet with those farmers and say, hey, we've got these incentives. Can we put them here? And that's one way to do it. We have some of that. There's one-off projects across the state, but we don't have a statewide investment in that, whether it's planning or people. And it's like, a lot of them that do it, they usually get a 3-year grant from somewhere, and they work for 2 years, and then they spend their last year scrambling to find funding to keep their job, and then they usually leave 6 months before it's over, and it's turnover and turnover and turnover. And those, there's also a disadoption rate that's pretty high where farmers will do cover crops or these things, and the state will be like, wow, look at all these new acres. And then the next year they won't do it because it's expensive. And so our state policies, our laws, they're not strategic, they're not long-term, and they don't fix the problem. Clearly. I mean, it's getting worse.
Sheesh. There isn't, like you said, there's not a comprehensive a solution. It's just like you said, they could put it wherever. Where they should put it is like where you said, Des Moines, right at those.
Yeah,
that's man, crazy. Who do you think bears the cost of cleaning up this nitrate pollution? Who do you think should bear it, I guess?
Yeah, I think right now we have a system where those of us downstream from agricultural pollution pay 2 costs. One is our water rates for the largest nitrate removal facility in the world is in Des Moines, Iowa.
We have that here in Iowa.
And it costs about $16,000 a day to run it.
Seriously.
Yep. And so
we
my
still
water
have,
rates,
and we still have.
we still have it. Yep.
So-
And that's for them to barely meet that 10 standard.
me.
Yeah.
You're kidding me.
And they have to do the lawn watering ban to just keep it under. Like they were delivering it at 10 last year. And this year I'm sure it got really close too. So you do the testing strip in your tap water. And it's like, oh my gosh.
And Iowa has the biggest testing in the world.
For the nitrate removal facility in the world. Yep. In Des Moines Water
And
Works.
it's still that high. That is a issue. Holy
Yeah, because it
moly.
comes in at 19, and then they have 3 water sources they can switch between: Des Moines River, Raccoon River, and they have a little gallery in the Des Moines Waterworks Park. And they prefer the gallery because it's usually the lowest amount of nitrate pollution, but they have to be able to switch, and they have a reservoir they use. But then it was like all really bad. What do you do? And I'll point out too, most rural communities in the state of Iowa do not have nitrate removal facilities. So their solution is to do blending with other water sources. And only 4% of water utilities in the state of Iowa have nitrate removal capacity. And so you think about all these other towns, these rural areas that don't have this, their one solution is so in Ottumwa, they have a reservoir that they mix it with. Well, what happens when the reservoir is not low, right? So that hasn't happened yet, thankfully, but it's gotten pretty close. And they only test it once a day. So maybe it's,
Sheesh,
maybe it is.
That's a big point there. What happens when it runs out? I know Fort Dodge has a deep well we get our water from. Really good water.
Yeah.
I do know that. But the part that freaks us out is when does that run out?
Yeah.
That's the issue.
And we all pay for that as ratepayers, right? That's what people who pay their water bill. And so that's one cost that we pay. The other, which is this conversation, is we pay with our health. Right? And you look at the areas where we have high nitrates and high water pollution and on these other environmental risk factors. We can't ever really say cancer is one thing. It's like a
combination.
We use the analogy, it's like a skyscraper of risk. It's like nitrates 1, radon's 1, exercise, diet, genetics. They're all like one floor in this skyscraper, right? But if we can take out 4 of them, radon, pesticides, nitrates, whatever it might be, let's take out those 3, right?
Yeah.
Let's get those out of there because they shouldn't be there in the first place.
Right.
And it's changeable. And the things that are not changeable, genetics or something like that, that's always going to be there. But this is just it's a fairness issue, right?
Right.
And so that's who's bearing the cost now. I think that as we look in the future, we have to make sure that the corporate agribusinesses that cause this are having to pay their fair share and helping clean it up. I think the retailers selling products have to have an incentive to do not just the right thing for their business, but the right thing for the rest of us. And I think farmers have an opportunity to reevaluate what inputs they put on their field and whether it's fertilizers or pesticides or other things. And our state has to do something about this. We've made some progress on that. This year at the State House, one of the things I worked on personally was helping pass a law, which took effect in July, to require that every new home that's built in the state of Iowa has a passive radon mitigation system.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah, that's something that we did this year.
We just talked about that on the first episode. That's you. Actually.
I helped write that.
That was you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, dude, a lot of people benefited from that, and especially you guys are giving. I did research and learned that on July 1st. Is we're giving out free radon tests.
Yeah, so the state of Iowa, through the Department of Health and Human Services and the American Lung Association, they'll have $20,000 worth, which is not enough. It ran out about a month last year, of free to radon testing.
You know what? I actually posted that on our TikTok page, and that one has had one of the most views and shares. And it's great. I mean, you're helping people out, and thanks for doing that, dude. Appreciate you. And I know that a lot of families did call off this podcast. I did put the number on there, and people did call. So
that's great to hear. Yeah, I mean, and this is my advice to people that might be listening. And if you live in Iowa, it seems like a lot of times there's not a lot you can do. The first thing you can do is test.
Yeah.
Test for radon. Test for nitrates in your drinking water, especially if you have a private well. All the things I just talked about with the standard and the testing and the infrastructure, none of that applies to a private well.
Seriously.
If you live out in a farmstead in Webster County, and you just live out there, and who's testing your well? Nobody, unless you do. The good news is there's a program through the county public health departments in every county in Iowa. It's called the Grants to Counties program, where you can get your well tested for free. And so you just contact your public health department. They'll be able to get somebody out there.
So here in Webster County, you could just get that.
Yep.
Okay, good.
And then you'll know, sometimes you'll find, and they test for more than just nitrates. So they'll test for arsenic and lead and nitrates. And I think they even do some pesticide testing and different things like that. So it's one of the very first things that you can do to protect your health.
I'm surprised this stuff isn't right in our faces. Hey, obviously the cancer crisis is in our faces, but we'll get to that eventually here, because I want to not just bring on fear and education. I want to find a solution or something that could help us.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that right at the end,
Sure.
because I want to not just scare people,
Yeah,
and freak them out.
Sometimes I get so into it that I forget how scary this is, because it's like my job, right?
Yeah.
And so if there's any point where you're like, I want to learn more about that, just ask me and we can spend more time on it.
I have this is probably not even part of this, but I have a weird question for you. The nitrates, eating pork. I don't really eat pork because I learned that there's no pores on pork, and they eat nitrate. I don't know if obviously it gets in. If we eat it, it goes in our body. Is that a thing, or am I just going
I'm not
crazy?
really sure about the science behind that. I will tell you that when we talked about nitrates in our cancer report, that cured meats, including pork, often are a source of nitrates, high nitrate foods. And when they're not consumed with vegetables or fruits that have the antioxidant effect, they can turn into these carcinogenic compounds that are recognized. So.
So I'm not that crazy.
It's not. I don't know all of it, but it's definitely like eating any cured meats, that sort of thing. And I don't think pork's a red meat. I think it's a white meat. But it's I would encourage you to ask somebody else with more info. But there's something to be said about cured meats in particular, and red meat being a source of high nitrates.
Okay, it's good to know, because I've talked to people about it, and sometimes they think I'm crazy, but
I can get you an answer too. Maybe I can ask some of my animal scientist friends. And
just curious. I mean, so we talked about what nitrate is, how it comes in our drinking water, how it could affect us, and then who's really driving that, right? Now let's talk about if someone has. Let's talk about the water treatment here. If someone has high level of nitrate, what can they realistically do? What can they do to fix that?
Yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of other folks that listen to this too that are also renters like I am. I don't own my home, and so I don't want to spend thousands of dollars on some water filtration system, nor do I have that kind of money, and I don't think other people do either. But there are options for folks. So the best technology that exists to remove nitrates from your drinking water, besides the prevention part, which is like the long-term solution, is the reverse osmosis.
Okay, that really works.
Yep, it does. It takes out everything that is of concern. And so you can get like under the sink ones for like I think a couple $100. If you're in a home, you can get like one for your water system in your home for, I don't know, usually around a couple thousand would be my guess, unless you just do the under the sink one too. So there are different options that are there. Water filters like your Brita water filter will not remove nitrates.
It does
your
not.
fridge
I was gonna
water
ask you
filter
that.
will not. There are some that you can look. They have like a special designation on there if they do, but it's really difficult. Some people think boiling water will get rid of it. Actually makes it worse because it concentrates it. So cooking is one example of like if you have your boiling for pasta and it goes down, and then you have more concentrated nitrate.
You hear that,
water.
folks? Do not warm your water, your tap water. Do not boil that. It will make the nitrates a lot worse.
And I would
So
tell
that's
you
good to
too.
know. That's good to know.
Yeah, especially if you're pregnant, it's something to think about. My sister just had my nephew, and so I was telling her she doesn't live here in Iowa, thankfully. In this context, I was just kind of telling her, make sure you know about your water. But in that scenario, if you're cooking with that water and then you're consuming the food from that, like that's definitely for the more sensitive groups like pregnant women, that could be an issue. And so maybe buying water and using that would be an option too.
You think water bottles have nitrates?
I'm sure that these things have, well, one, it's plastic, right? And so we know that microplastics are everywhere in all of us. So they have their own issues. But the other thing I'll point out that people don't realize about tap water, this is regulated by the same standard as our tap water here in the state. So this could have 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate, and it would be completely fine. It's the
And
only
they
way you
sell
would
it
know
to
that.
us? They're allowed to sell it to us?
Because it meets our federal safe drinking water.
You got to be kidding
So
me.
people don't realize that like our bottled water is somebody else's tap water. I bet on this one,
way.
it probably says, because it usually says where it's from.
I'm sorry we gave you that bottle.
No,
we
that's
have
okay.
other bottles here.
I was
we'll give you
thirsty,
some.
so well, I can't seem to find it on here, but usually, oh, here it is. Distributed by Sam's West Incorporated in Bentonville, Arkansas. Yeah, and they have the report on
You know what?
water
Hang
quality
tight
there.
here. There you go. This is the good water here, man.
That's the
Help
real
yourself.
stuff.
This is my stuff. Ready?
Yeah. Look at
All
that.
right. Try that. I'm a huge water
Okay.
guy. Yeah, I am
I love it.
huge.
I feel like I'm going to owe you like $20 after
No,
this or
no,
something.
please. We about to try to give you some nitrate at cancer. That was not good. Let me know what you think, though. It's good stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
I
take
kind
it.
of feel like it's a bottle of wine over here, but
Not yet, man. Is it 5 o'clock? No. Man, this is good. This is so good. So much knowledge. I hope people are listening right now and learning some stuff because this is a game changer. What else we could do to kind of help us fight these nitrates?
yeah, I think that one of the biggest issues, and it sometimes feels like a cop-out answer, but unfortunately with an issue this complicated and this big, it takes a big, complicated response, right? And so one of the things I always tell folks is, even if you don't feel like you're an expert on it, because most people aren't, right? And even me who spends my day job on this, it's like I take my notes, right? Like these numbers there's so many things floating around. But it's important that your elected officials know that this is something that's concerning to you. So even if it's your local county folks or your city council or your mayor, but especially your state legislators, because those folks, state representatives and state senators, most people don't know who they are.
Right.
They have so much authority and power at our state house to do anything, or in our case, nothing about this.
Yeah.
And there are some folks that lead on it down there, but really it's not been a concern for the majority. Now, I will say things have changed quite a bit over the last year as this has become more talked about and more people become more aware of it. So even in the governor's race and Senate and all these other things, our cancer rate has provided an opening for us to really talk about
Make a change.
what is going on, and this is one of the things that are going on. So I think it's really important to express your concern to your elected officials. It doesn't have to be the only thing you say, and it doesn't mean you agree on everything, but this is something that is very important that they know that you're concerned about.
That's right, because right now, like you said, there's a big governor race, and they're almost that's what they're running on.
Yeah.
So it's good because we can make some changes. But I will leave you. I will leave you with this question to wrap us all up. And this has been great, man. I love this. You're awesome. I hope people are listening are going to learn some. But I'm going to ask you this last question here. If you had 60 seconds to speak directly to every parent in Iowa about nitrates in their drinking water, what would you tell them, and what should they do? What should they do tomorrow?
Wow, that's a good question. I would start by saying, I'm sorry that you're worried about this. I'm sorry that we're here. I wish that we didn't get to this point. But now that we're here, we kind of have to link arms and figure out what are we going to do now. And so as we look to the future, I think there are so many ways for us to get involved and to make sure that this is better. I think one of them is, again, letting your elected officials know and making your voice heard on this issue, whether it's on social media, but most effective is email them, call them, show up at their town halls, that sort of thing. We also are hosting statewide sessions through the Iowa Environmental Council where we're talking about our report, answering questions, and helping you prepare how to be a better advocate. So you can find that on our website, iaenvironment.org. It's our cancer listening, our outreach sessions this next time. And I would say, too, there are things that you can do. Test your home for radon and lead paint if you haven't, but also your private well, especially if you're on it, for nitrates. And then figure out what options are available for you for reverse osmosis systems or other options that you might have. And then maybe talk to your pediatrician and see, are there any other concerns? Especially for parents, there are other contaminants in water, lead being one, for example, that are extremely damaging to the development of children. So just getting a better picture of where you're at is a great first step. Yeah. It's not hopeless. There are things that we can do individually, and there's things that we have to do collectively, and it starts by just getting a better understanding. So wherever you're at on this knowledge ladder about this issue, there are ways to get involved, and the Iowa Environmental Council is here to help. We have plenty of partners around the state that are happy to help, and just reach out, and we're happy to be involved.
Man, that was great. I appreciate you. You're awesome, Cody. You drove up. You laid it down today, man. I appreciate you guys. Hope you guys learned something today. And I'll see you guys on episode 3. And this was awesome. This is fire, man. Thanks again, my man. So
thank you for having me.
Without further ado, let's get it, my boy.